I stepped off the plane with a heart full of hope that I hadn't felt in years. Thanksgiving week had always been chaos. Travelers rushing through terminals, families embracing at gates, the smell of coffee and anticipation hanging in the air. But this time felt different. This time my kids had called me. Not a quick text or a distant reminder, but actual warmth in their voices when they said the words I'd been waiting so long to hear. "Dad, we miss you. Please fly out. We want you here." 2 weeks of anticipation had filled those days before my departure. I packed light, just one small suitcase, but my heart carried more weight than any luggage could hold. I told myself this was the beginning of something healed, something mended after years of silence and distance. As I walked through the airport, surrounded by the chaos of holiday travel, I felt the first flutter of something I thought I'd lost: belonging. But the moment I stepped through the arrivals gate, that flutter died. I waited. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became 40. Around me, families collapsed into each other's arms. Parents kissed their children. Couples reunited with desperate embraces. A little boy shouted, "Grandpa!" and bolted across the terminal. Everyone was celebrating something I thought I was about to have. And I just stood there, watching strangers experience the joy I'd imagined for myself. I pulled out my phone and called Ethan. The phone rang and rang before his voicemail clicked on. Cheerful, casual, the voice of someone who had no idea that his father was standing alone in an airport, heart beginning to crack. I tried Lily next. Her phone went straight to voicemail, as if it had been turned off entirely. I told myself to be patient. Holiday traffic was unpredictable. They were probably driving, stuck on some congested highway, racing against time to pick me up. I found a cold metal bench and sat down, my jacket pulled tight, and I waited. An hour passed, then 2. The crowd thinned out until I was the only person left, still sitting, still hoping, still telling myself stories about why they hadn't arrived. Airport staff began moving through the terminals with their cleaning equipment, wiping down surfaces, emptying trash bins. The world was closing down around me. While I remained frozen in place, my suitcase beside me like a monument to my own foolishness. When I finally stood up, the hallway was nearly empty. The departure boards flickered above me, showing flights to places I would never go tonight. I walked outside into the cold night air and called a taxi, staring out the window the entire ride to the small hotel near the airport, watching my phone, praying it would ring. It never did. I checked into my room and sat on the edge of the bed in the darkness, phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. Hours crawled by. Midnight approached. And then, finally, my phone buzzed. For a split second, hope surged through me. But it wasn't a call. It was a picture message from Ethan. The Thanksgiving table was beautiful, warm, abundant. The photograph captured a moment of pure joy. My son, my daughter, their spouses, their children, all gathered around a table laden with food. Someone had captured them mid-laugh, their faces bright, their cups raised in celebration. And right in the center of that perfect image was an empty chair. My chair. The caption read, "Wish you were here." My fingers shook as I typed, "I was here, I landed, I waited. Why didn't you pick me up?" I watched the screen. The message showed delivered. But there was no response. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not ever. In that dark hotel room, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was something colder, something that settled deep into my chest like winter ice. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't been stuck in traffic. They had celebrated without me, and they had wanted me to see it. They had wanted me to know that I was excluded, that I was outside looking in, that I didn't matter enough to even be there in person. The next morning came gray and empty. I hadn't slept. My mind kept replaying that photograph, that empty chair, that cruel caption. Around noon, when I finally forced myself to leave the bed, my phone rang. It was Mark, an old business partner I hadn't spoken to in months. He said he'd heard I was in town. When I asked how he knew, he hesitated. There was something in that pause that made my stomach turn. I was at Ethan's place yesterday, he said quietly. My breath caught. Mark told me what he'd overheard. My kids had been talking before dinner, dismissing the idea that I would actually come. They said I was too scared to travel alone. They said that inviting me was just something to make themselves feel better, a way to ease their own guilt. Someone had even joked about setting a place for me to prove a point, and they had laughed about it. They had actually laughed at the thought of me, at my effort, at my love. When Mark finished, I couldn't speak. The phone felt heavy in my hand. After he hung up, I sat in that small hotel room and felt something break inside me. Not dramatically, not with noise, but quietly and completely. For years, I had blamed circumstances for the distance between us. I had accepted their excuses, made allowances, told myself that time would heal things. But now I saw the truth clearly. I wasn't family to them. I was a punchline, an old man they could mock safely because they assumed I would forgive them anyway. That's when the decision came to me, arriving not as a sudden burst of anger, but as a calm, clear realization. There was something my children had always taken for granted, something they assumed would be theirs without question. I walked out of the hotel and found a legal service downtown, the kind of place where broken people go when they finally decide they won't be broken anymore. The lawyer was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She asked me what brought me in, and I told her I needed to rewrite my will. For 2 hours I sat across from her and rewrote my entire future. I removed my children from it completely.
They would inherit nothing, not the savings
I'd accumulated through decades of work. Not the house I'd built, not the business shares, not even a single sentimental item. Instead, I created a scholarship fund in my late wife's name. The money would go to single mothers trying to rebuild their lives, women who reminded me of the strength and courage and unconditional love that my wife had possessed. I added a note at the end of the document, and I watched the lawyer's eyes widen as she read it. My children are not forgotten. They are simply free. Free from the responsibility of caring about their father ever again. When the papers were signed, I walked out into the cold city streets feeling something I hadn't expected to feel. Peace. A month later, Christmas came. The streets were decorated with lights. Carols played in shops and restaurants. Families were everywhere, preparing their celebrations. And then my phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice artificially cheerful as he asked if I was flying out for Christmas. Lily's voice jumped in, saying it wouldn't be the same without me. I told them calmly that, no, I wouldn't be coming, but I would be in town for something important. On Christmas Eve, I arrived at Ethan's house with no luggage and no gifts. Behind me was a lawyer carrying a sealed envelope. When the door opened and my children's faces lit up with what they thought was joy, I stepped inside and placed the envelope on the table. "Open it," I said. Ethan's hands shook as he broke the seal. His eyes widened as he read. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. "What is this?" Ethan whispered. "Dad, what is this?" "You changed your will?" Lily gasped. "You removed us?" I nodded and spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had finally reached his limit. "Because I landed. I waited. I called. And you laughed at me. You pretended to want me there, and then you mocked me for believing you. I'm not just your father. I'm a human being. And humans break." Ethan's voice cracked. "Dad, we didn't think you'd really come." "That's the problem," I said. "You didn't think of me at all." I turned and walked out into the cold night, leaving behind a house full of guilt and the weight of their own choices. That Christmas, I didn't sit at anyone's table. I volunteered at a local shelter, sitting with people who valued my presence without conditions or judgment. I donated to the scholarship fund. I spent time with people who actually wanted me there. When my phone buzzed with messages from Ethan and Lily, apologies and excuses and promises to change, I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because healing sometimes means closing a door gently and walking forward into your own life. That night, I understood something I'd forgotten over the years. Family isn't always defined by blood. It isn't measured by who calls or visits or inherits what. True family is respect. It's kindness. It's showing up for someone without keeping score. I had learned to value my own worth. I had honored my own heart. And in walking away, I had discovered something far more valuable than any inheritance. I could have left behind. I had discovered peace. I had discovered myself. I had discovered that the real justice in this world isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about dignity. It's about knowing when to stop giving to people who don't appreciate the gift. It's about having the courage to stand tall and walk away, and in doing so, to teach the people who took you for granted what it actually costs to lose.